Hello, I'm Jonathan Mast, and welcome to this edition of the Sedgwick podcast. And today we have a really interesting topic and two great subject matter experts from Sedgwick. We are talking about fine art losses and what that means, and there's been a lot of recent news on this. And my guests are Aliette Fenton-Sharp, Claims Underwriting Director, and Grace Best-Devereux, Executive Adjuster, Fine Arts and Jewelry, both of which sound really fascinating. And I'm sure for most of our listeners, if they're like me, I don't know a whole lot about any of this. So before we get started in the really deep questions, how about if you both kick us off with a little background and how you got into this?
Perfect. Shall I begin, Grace?
Yeah, sounds great.
Fantastic. So, hello, my name is Aliette Fenton-Sharp. Thank you, Jonathan, for the introduction. I'm from Miami, but I've been in London for a little over 20 years. I'm an art historian by study, actually, by degree, but I've been working in marine insurance since I moved to London. And I've specifically worked on marine cargo and fine art and CC insurance. I'm the Director of Claims Underwriting in the London office. So I've been in Sedgwick almost a year now. And my team handle claims in most areas of insurance. And fine art is one of the ones where we have the most growth and we're targeting. So I'm really happy to be here and to chat a little bit with you guys about a topic that I love and that is very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm Grace Best-Devereux, and I'm part of the kind of international major complex loss team. And Aliette mentioned about, doing something that she loves for work, and that's really at the core of what led me to being a loss adjuster. I actually started as a sculptor in college, and then I wanted to pursue a master's in art business, and that's actually what brought me to London. So I did that program, and I learned a lot about kind of the financial elements of art. And I worked at another loss adjuster in the insurance market, and I joined Sedgwick in March. And I'm just absolutely loving the role and getting to work with people like Aliette. And it's just a phenomenal kind of company and place to be working in this very exciting line of business that I do also love.
Well, I think first thing we can say is, so see, that's a message to all the parents out there. When your child comes to you and they say, I want to be a fine arts major, right? There is a lot you can do with this. Am I wrong?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Although when my parents heard that I was going to change my major to doing sculpture, they said, make sure you get a business degree. So I'm grateful that they also gave me that sense. But, it's a really good mixture because it really helps with what I do.
Yeah, and I got a degree, a business degree as well. I did get an MBA because my parents, exactly the same thing. When I was doing art history at Towson University, they were like, and what are you going to do with an art history degree? I said, well, I don't know. I could be a lawyer. I could be anything having to do with reading. And they were like, okay, well, just can you get a business degree just so you know how to do your taxes or something at least.
There you go. Well, and there you go. Very wise advice. And if we've done nothing else, we've helped, parents of tomorrow as they guide their children. So Grace, taking that business knowledge and your fine arts knowledge, I do think many people are familiar with last year's activist attacks on fine art in some of the major European museums, and those included Van Gogh's Sunflowers and even the Mona Lisa, probably the most famous to those of us who haven't done much other art. And, can you talk some about, are these acts of vandalism more common maybe than the average listener would know?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting concept because acts of violence against art, you see it commonly throughout history. There's a lot of moments where the destruction of art is intertwined with social change and political change and I think what we've been seeing recently is actually the climate change side of things that's really pushing through a lot of this kind of public acts of violence. And one of the kind of earliest examples of acts of violence on art that I was aware of was, I think I was 7 at the time, and that's when the Buddhas of Bamiyan were destroyed by the Taliban. And it kind of sunk in to me as a child of how important it was, even though I didn't fully understand the context. And so that really kind of illustrated to me this kind of cultural element in terms of humanity and the interaction of art, because it makes us feel things, strongly. You can look at a painting, it can make you cry, it can make you feel joy, There's all these interesting interactions. One of my favorite kind of stories in terms of art and European museums was during the suffragette movement. There was a woman named Anne Hunt who went into the National Gallery in 1914, and she actually took a meat cleaver in and hacked into this painting of Thomas Carlyle, who was one of the founders of the National Gallery, if I recall. And it just seems like there's these intense moments of change. And when I'm looking at the more recent attacks, like the Mona Lisa and Van Gogh Sunflowers, I think it's a slightly different approach, because it's not so much about, the artwork and who it's depicting. It's kind of more about, from my perspective, the institution that's being attacked. So while attacks on art are common, I think that there's been a bit of a contextual change to the theme here, and it's really an interesting thing to approach from an insurance perspective.
I wanted to also add to that, Grace, that it's exactly what you're saying. They're also not attacking the actual work of art. They're actually, they're not damaging the artwork, thankfully. They are actually damaging the outside. They're damaging the base. They're taking pictures or paintings, not in every context, but in a lot of the more famous ones, they didn't actually get to the Mona Lisa because it's so covered by glass. So I think they also knew that. So I don't think they mean to harm the pieces. I think it's a statement, whereas before they were perfectly happy to kind of, like Grace said, hack into a painting. Here they're destroying the base, but so for an insurance, from an insurance point of view, it's not a total loss. So at least we have that kind of a little bit of relief from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sometimes we forget that the Mona Lisa has been recorded to be attacked at least 5 times. So, the most recent one, we had, I think it was a pie thrown at it. There's been acid poured on it in the 50s, and it was smashed with a rock, and it was spray painted in the 70s. So, when you get these amazing pieces of art that, everyone seems to kind of know of, it does attract attention, be it maybe negative attention sometimes.
Well, the poor Mona Lisa, she just keeps smiling.
Can't catch a break.
But I'll tell you what, that is interesting, and thank goodness there is a lot of that protection, but still requires someone like each of you as experts to assist. And so, Aliette, as we talk about that security measures, museums, what are they doing to implement and mitigate the risk of fine art attacks? Because those are really good points that you both just made.
Well, some of the things that are happening at the moment is they're trying to have additional presence in museums and on exhibits. There is a huge issue in the world, it seems, with not having enough people to do jobs and roles and stuff like that. But it is the goal of museums or that's one of the strategies we have heard of that they're trying to do with having more presence. The other thing is that they're putting in CCTV and other formats of being able to stay in contact. I mean, nowadays, even a homeowner can have that Ring doorbell that actually you can see the person that's at your door delivering your package. So they're doing a lot of stuff with video and with being able to have like an eye on the areas. Those are the two things that I kind of saw were the most from a claims handling perspective that we've heard of. But actually, Grace might have some more information about things as from a loss adjusting perspective. She might have heard some more things that they might be doing, some more security measures that are being implemented.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot more works are being encased in glass, and there's a lot more like proximity alarms. So like I like to go and visit the Tate, and those proximity alarms will set off if you get too close, and you immediately will have kind of a staff member coming over to see what's going on. So I think it's kind of a two-branched approach to it, in that we have better alert systems that can bring over like a physical person to help manage whatever's happening. But then there's also the more like static security measure, which is like, museum glass or putting things in cases and having some of these cases are really high tech, and they'll have pressure sensors, they'll have vibration sensors, so that if something is, about to happen or in the process of beginning, that, police can be alerted if it's the case of theft, or, the conservators can be put on call in case of vandalism. And in, private homes, you've got great kind of security systems that, as technology increases in our lives and how we can implement it, it's getting much more advanced in terms of not only monitoring, but also kind of protection side of things.
Yeah, I mean, as Grace is saying, on some of these houses also, like private homes that have collections, some of the owners can have cameras and they can look at them on their phone, so they could be on vacation and, watching their collection, and then potentially have someone nearby that can go if there's any issues. You no longer have to depend on what your alarm system is attached to. It can usually be attached to your actual devices. So very high tech.
Yeah, in today's world, I'm sure it's getting more and more fine-tuned in that sense. But still, Grace, I guess that leads to the question of why is it difficult to quantify the number of loss events or the extent of damages following fine art attacks?
That's a really great question, because sometimes the value of art is actually intertwined with the history of the art piece. So I mentioned earlier how Anne Hunt took like a meat cleaver to this portrait. And so she went to trial for it, and she had this amazing quote, which, has now accompanied this art piece. And she says, "This picture will be of added value and of great historical importance because it has been honored by the attention of a militant." And in the end, this art piece, it's a beautiful portrait. It may have reached more people naturally, but it was kind of thrust into this movement of the suffragettes. And actually, the National Portrait Gallery held a special exhibition about rebel women, where this piece was one of the kind of central focuses of it. So sometimes when an art piece is damaged and it becomes kind of part of the pop culture of art, it can actually make it more desirable in a way. Now, this doesn't account to everything by any means. And it's also really hard sometimes to identify what's an accident and what's purposeful. And so that's why it's hard to kind of quantify the number of events of like what is a fine art attack. There's this incident where a gentleman appears to have tripped over his shoelaces at the Fitzwilliam Museum at Cambridge, and he shattered these 3, monumental Chinese vases. And it's still like not really clear if that was an accident or was it something that was staged. I don't think that there was ever kind of a clear decision made, and I don't think we could ever really know what exactly happened in that situation aside from the fact that these pieces were broken. And it's really tricky to then take the kind of news feeds of art pieces that get damaged all the time accidentally, and then figuring out, without it being throwing a pie at it or having orange powder sprayed at it, what exactly is an attack, what's an accident, also kind of how to quantify the value of it, because sometimes, that's the beauty and difficulty of this job, is that there's all these minute facets of the gemstone, and you have to look through every single different viewpoint to really understand how value is attributed to it. And so that's why it's really tricky. And it makes my job exciting because I have to look at things more carefully, have different perspectives on it. But definitely for the wider insurance market, it's tough to have a exact number pinned to it.
Yes, it's very difficult for claims handlers in those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we depend on a lot of the time, we depend on the recommendation of loss adjusters like Grace to give us some answers. And as she said, when things happen and there is no answer, it is just really difficult to make a proper determination. So, yeah, it is exciting, but it's often very difficult.
Stress-inducing.
Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, you've both convinced me to wear slip-on shoes when I go to the next art museum.
Yeah. Good choice.
I don't want to be accused of tripping over my shoelaces and wiping out, a fine work of art from the 4th century BC. So that is just, I'm sure, as with all things in this industry, there are some almost unbelievable things. And so, going back to you, Aliette, how can Sedgwick help reduce fine art risk? Obviously, we can't tell people not to wear lace-up shoes, but help provide financial valuation of items, costing of incidences, and when and where the damage is discovered.
Well, we do offer lots of services in our team in particular. I mean, things like pre-risk surveys. Grace can provide a valuation or support insureds with inventories. We, like everything, we learn from previous mistakes. So a lot of the time most of the time, not just Grace, but myself, we're talking to underwriters or brokers rather than just claims people to try and see if we can help with claims issues. So we go to the placing people, to the actual underwriters, and try to find out things that would help them to write their business and take on the risk. Also to provide an example, we currently have somebody in, I believe it's the Philippines, that needs, a number of shops. So in fine art, we don't just look at paintings, but we look at jewellery and specie, the whole business. And we're going to go out to the Philippines or somebody that's stationed there is going to go out to the client and is going to provide a report of what they have currently, give a valuation of the worth of the items. And by having that, we provide a good basis, and we help with reducing the risk. So providing financial valuations just means that if you do have a claim, it's very easy to just say, well, this is what items are worth, and this is what the incident would cost if it was a total loss. If there's always a gray line if something is just damaged and you have to repair it. But if there are total losses, there are ways to mitigate that issue. There's lots of things that we can do, working, communicating with the insured, and communicating with underwriters, and then unfortunately, if something does happen, we are there to support.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Aliette has said. It's kind of that concept of hindsight is 20/20. And so when you're thinking about how to avoid something, like how to reduce fine art risks, the best kind of people to ask are the ones that have dealt with it when it does inevitably go wrong. And, meeting with the market as a whole and understanding things from the different perspectives of kind of what clients' needs are and how, our experience can be of benefit in terms of figuring out, ways of making sure that pieces are valued correctly or often enough, or what kind of material is the piece, and, for a photograph, should you be hanging it in full sunshine? I would hope not. But sometimes people don't know this right off the bat. So it's helpful to have kind of the team at Sedgwick, and we have such a range of expertise that, if I needed a French decorative arts expert, I can find one within the team in a matter of seconds. Or if I need someone who specializes in Latin American art, we have that. And so it's really helpful to have such a diverse team in terms of our backgrounds and our specialism, because then when it comes to questions or kind of working with the wider market, we have those resources that we can draw on to help clients, mitigate things properly.
Well, Grace, going back to you, then what types of fine art claims does Sedgwick's property major and complex loss team see the most of? I think our listeners would find that really interesting.
Well, it's a little bit funny because it's not the most glamorous. It's not like we're, in the Thomas Crown Affair and there's a team of art thieves, rappelling down from the ceilings on helicopters. That would be kind of fun. But
although we've had that before, but
yeah,
in Hatton Garden. Yep.
Yeah. So we don't get that all the time. When we do, it feels very cool to be involved. Although most of it is really related to art in transit. And it's because art, it's fragile, it's movable, it's got immeasurable value that, can change based on all these different elements that it participates within. So it's a lot of transit. It's a lot of kind of water leaks and kind of the day-to-day accidents that people regularly buy insurance for to protect from. And I think that, the transit really does take the cake in terms of volume. And then in terms of value, we definitely see more kind of on the institution side of things. And I think that that's at least from my experience so far.
Just to follow on Grace's message of transit losses, we see a lot of that in the claims team as well. We see a lot of sending losses, a lot of couriers, packages being sent from different parts of the world and also within the U.S. A lot, especially since the pandemic, people took to buying things online, and therefore they would buy carpets worth, over $20,000. They were buying lots of prints, rare coins, just all kinds of items, even wine, very, very expensive wine, and they'll have it shipped. So we see losses in that arena, the boxes being tampered with or broken into, items broken. So if you send a case of wine, you might receive, 6 bottles in good shape and then a few that aren't in good shape. We also understand that possibly in the U.S., every time you buy an engagement ring, if you want to have it insured, the jewelers tend to send it to a valuer that might not be in the same state. So we have a very large number of sending losses. But there are so many movements that it's almost inevitable that there will be losses. Sometimes it's not the fault of anyone. Sometimes we do have thefts. Other times it's because they go to airports and they get lost in, Grace had one recently where it was lost in one of the European airports for a few weeks, and then it was found. But so we tend to see a lot of that at the moment. And as Grace said, it's not the most glamorous of claims.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of even me as a consumer when I'm buying, special pens or a pair of earrings, when I'm buying something, I look and I say, yes, free shipping, perfect, that's exactly what I want. Yes, express delivery, I can get it quick. And I think the way that the consumer has developed, it has changed the behavior of the sellers in terms of, someone has just bought, a series of prints that's, about $30,000 in total. Let's put them all in a package together and use this courier service that can send it in express mail, and it will get there cheaply and quickly. But I think what sometimes the consumer and then also these sellers forget is that something like wine is really fragile. And if you scratch the label, that might impact the value of the bottle. Or, prints need to be, if it's a photograph, it can't be exposed to high heats. So, there's this interesting trend of maybe actually a fine art shipper would be better suited for this type of object because they're going to be handling it differently and processing it differently, but that might cost a lot more. And so there's this change. Definitely, I think COVID had a big impact on it, where, the expectations of the consumer aren't in line with what the market has available, and senders want to save some money on their shipping, and, art pieces get shipped all around the world for art fairs, for museum exhibitions, for gallery openings. And that's one of the things that, helps us access these really amazing pieces of art. But it also then puts it at risk. So it's a really fine line that is also kind of a gray area in terms of figuring out what's best.
Well, Aliette, how can creating awareness, and you just both talked about this a little bit, of potential risk exposures and asset vulnerability potentially stop a loss event from escalating or even hopefully mitigate it completely?
Yeah, it's such a good question coming from what we just discussed. And very much what Grace said. This is, I think, why our partnership of her being a loss adjuster and me handling the claim is so powerful, because exactly what she just said, different mediums, different items have ways of being. We're in such a global world now. So, if I want wine from California, I might just buy a case of wine from California, and although it might be expensive, it's a lot cheaper than me flying to California to get my case of wine.
Putting it in your bag.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Or and like Grace said, talking about, during the pandemic, I tend to go to Spain on holiday at least once a year because I have friends and family there. And I couldn't go to Spain during the pandemic, so I would buy, every few months, we would buy a case of wine from Spain, knowing that, again, that it's fragile, also being aware that it can't be exposed to high heat either. You don't want wine that's been, especially red wine that's been sitting in some warehouse in the heat somewhere. It just, all these things, underwriters are very clued up. They know when they're writing their insurance policies about all these things. And us as loss adjusters and claims handlers, we also not just follow their rhythm, but we're constantly reading about trends and things that are happening. And so we are creating an awareness to ourselves, to our teams. We're making sure that everybody in the team is fully aware and learning from the mistakes, seeing what the trends are, and speaking with our peers in the market about what they've been seeing will help to create these, like you say, certain. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of these things can't be stemmed completely, and you can't because of so many factors. I mean, you cannot stop. If a case of wine goes through an airport, you can try to help. They wouldn't put it in some heated room, or even a refrigerator that would freeze it. But a lot of the time it's just impossible to control those things, or if there is a blizzard as it's coming in the truck, some things you just can't help because of weather, or other factors. But, knowledge is key, and it's just such an important part of this whole business, and communication, being able to speak to people about what has been happening and what are the potential risks, and being able to share that knowledge amongst the people that are handling these claims, from a claims handling to a loss adjusting perspective.
Yeah.
Do you want to add something? Yeah.
As you were mentioning that, it was making me vividly recall one of these claims that I had recently. That was another sending loss. And we had kind of towards the end of the claim suggested that when the gallery was packing their, fine jewelry or rare coins or kind of small valuable items, that maybe they record the packing process. And the gallery was like, oh, we never thought of that. And yet, this is a great way of preventing kind of it being received and saying, oh, there's nothing in the box, because then you could say, oh, look, here, we have a video of us packing it, then is it the courier's fault, or maybe you did receive it and it fell out before you noticed? Oh, there it is under the couch kind of thing. So there's lots of opportunities to kind of educate as well. And I think that's where we really add value to the people that we interact with, be it on the insurance side or be it on the insured side.
Well, as we come to a close of our discussion and so many interesting things that you both have shared, when it comes to fine art losses and determining risk exposure is the key to preservation. Just throw this out to both of you. What other words of wisdom might you share with our listeners that you want to leave them with on final thoughts?
Great. I'm going to let you start with this one.
Okay.
Because all I could think of is communication, and as we said earlier, and knowledge is key.
Yeah, and I think that really kind of clues into where my thought process was going. From my perspective, I think that regular evaluations are so important, because kind of at the heart of it, art objects are they have a liquid value. So, dependent on, a multitude of factors, the value can change. And that's why, fitting these objects into the framework of insurance can be difficult, because you have to consider, when was the last time this was valued, Was it 3 years ago? That might be sufficient to have an idea of what it is. Was it 5 years ago? Maybe we should, look at this again. I certainly think that there are individuals and institutions sometimes that you'll say, oh, evaluation was done 10 years ago. And you think, oh, great. In 2013, what was the world like? Was this artist even well known at that stage? And that's when it becomes a more difficult process for insurers to actually know what they're insuring. Sometimes it's that the insured doesn't know what their art collection is worth, and maybe they should specify the object. The art market can be kind of an opaque and muddy kind of market where it's not exactly clear what the values are at play. And so that's why I think if there was any kind of singular piece of overarching advice, it would be that, regular evaluations are really helpful and necessary for this whole process. And then a humorous one, but you wouldn't believe how often I interact with it, is maybe don't put bubble wrap on your oil painting because it will leave an indent.
I wanted to add something about that too, but from a claims handling perspective, please, if you have anything that you believe, like Grace says, if you believe you have something of value, possibly a watch that you might have inherited, or a painting that you found in the loft that you think it could have some value, don't try to put it under your home insurance. The chances are that if there is a claim, that the home insurers will not be able to actually give you what you deserve for that piece. Unless you have a true valuation, unless you trust that whoever is giving you that valuation knows what they're talking about. I've seen so many people over the years who've tried to put rare books and rare paintings in their home policies, and then they've had water damage or fire damage, and they then realized they were sitting on something quite valuable, and unfortunately only got what would be worth, something at your local bookshop. So it's really important. Art insurance is not the most expensive of things, and it will give you the best cover for your risks. So definitely talk to people. At Sedgwick, we have a really brilliant fine art team, a global team. We're almost 20 fine art experts throughout the world. So if you're in any region and you want to talk to a fine art specialist, you can not only just get in contact with Grace or myself, but we have specialists throughout the world that can, you can have a conversation with them and see how we can help, because it's much better than putting as I said, not that home insurance is bad. But some of your valuables may just need a little bit better insurance. There's so many clauses that aren't covered within the home insurance policy. So have a look.
Yeah, Aliette is so right on that, and it's something that I see quite a bit of, with fires of, but my library collection is insured with my home policy. And that's where, I think, the experience of Aliette and understanding all of this and, being such an expert in this line of business, and then our wider team with all their specialisms, we could definitely provide kind of the advice and guidance that helps, avoid these unfortunate moments of I just put my elbow through this painting accidentally. Like, is it insured correctly? Who knows?
Yeah, wear and tear is not covered. Mysterious disappearance isn't covered in your home insurance, but it is covered in your fine art and jewelry policies. I mean, yep. The dog ate my homework, and it is covered in a fine art policy, but not in your home insurer's policy.
Yeah, making sure that you have the right policy for the right kind of object is just, the key here.
Thank you both so much. I mean, I think whether people are listening that are extreme experts, or we hope a lot of people are listening that honestly, quite like myself, know very little about the fine arts world. So this has been very educational. I think a lot of great tips, ideas, and then just thinking through, if you're looking for the experts, that at Sedgwick we have an amazing team. And so just want to remind everyone, if you'd like to learn more, please visit www.sedgwick.com and you can find out more, and then you can get in touch with Aliette and Grace and others, and we have people all over the world. So thank you both for being with me today.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us to do this.
All right. Well, until next time, we'll talk to our listeners then.